All right, everyone. Welcome back to Dan's Astrology. Today is Friday, April the 3rd. Um, Last video I did was about the full moon in Libra, and I've been basically taking the approach recently to do at least full moon videos, new moon videos, and try to talk about all the astrology that's going on with the full moon. And yet I talked a lot about Venus going into Taurus, and I talked a lot about the Saturn Neptune stuff, but one thing it's hard to cover it all, and I didn't talk about the square that forms when Venus entering Taurus squares Pluto in Aquarius. However, well, why not just get into that now, basically, right? So today the day the full moon is over, it's entered Scorpio, and the Scorpio moon is hitting the T-square with Venus in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius. And I was thinking about the themes around this, and I had a bunch of stuff on my mind. I drew some tarot cards, and the strongest resonating one was basically to talk about some themes that I noticed rewatching The X-Files. And I think it's a good way to approach the topic because I have to admit, Venus Pluto aspects are kind of uncomfortable and difficult. And the thing about Pluto too is that it can kind of maybe seem a bit like extreme, right? And the thing about this is that it makes it a lot easier when I start to think about the X-Files and the fact that I have been basically, for better or worse, a X-Files fan since I was a child, basically. And the thing about growing up with permissive parents who don't have very much, I probably watched a lot of things that I shouldn't when I was young. But despite of this, I'm actually there's this thing about the threshold experience of being a child and growing up, and when you start to become more aware of things I don't know, drugs and alcohol or sex or whatever it is. And one of the things that's really funny is that there's a lot of music that I listened to as a kid that had all this references about drugs. And then it wasn't until I, was becoming a teenager that I'm oh, I guess I was just kind of stupid about, or basically the whole content of pop music when you're from, until you're 12 years old, you're kind of ignorant about what the whole adult world is, basically. And then it's then once you go through, you actually grow up and live your life, and then you can come back and watch all these X-Files episodes that you were one of the things about this, you got to understand that when you were a 90s kid growing up with X-Files on the TV, it was very much there's this kind of children on the playground level of talking about what was going on in the world and in pop culture. And in the same way that kids would talk, there's one sir, I always remember this works well, I think, for Venus and Pluto. Do you remember the era when children, you probably wouldn't know very much about the I don't know, about they're the teenagers who would go to rock and roll shows and listen to their loud teenager music, and then when you're too young to appreciate this yourself, you basically approach it from a level of did you hear that Marilyn Manson removed one of his ribs so he could suck his own dick? And then this is what the children conversation is like. Or did you hear that Ozzy Osbourne bit the head off a dove? And it's as a child, you don't understand what the appeal is of music. You just see adults and teenagers they're loud heavy metal and they're grunge rock, and it's just a bunch of crazy people who apparently basically shoot themselves, suck their own dicks, bite heads off birds, and the adult world is crazy. And it's you're as a child, you are being thrown into a world full of madness, basically, right? But in this, there is still in that context, there's also, did you hear about the X-Files episode about the Pooh Man, about how there's a monster who lives in the sewer system and it's like the grossest X-Files episode of them all. Like, so in the childhood imagination, you're kind of imagining what is out there in the world, and you have, all these crazy rock and rollers and celebrities who are, like just giving themselves over to Satan, and then you have like Pooh monsters in the sewer, and when you start getting to this, is at least the discomfort and the disgust and the unsettling quality is still there, but you start to enter this kind of goofy territory where at least you can sort of like have fun with it, right? So with all this in mind, this is kind of what we're dealing with. I was motivated to rewatch the X-Files, but for a number of reasons. That there has been a bunch of the podcasts that I like to listen to have recently released episodes about the X-Files and about how good it is. And not only that, but that there's so much in there that is like trying to communicate to the mainstream audience this legitimate underground conspiracy culture around UFOs and about a bunch of stuff. And that it's actually, and so for that's one thing, is that there's a lot of interest being stirred up around this, especially in light of what might be happening in current events. Second of all, is that I had the good fortune of getting an entire box set of X-Files DVDs, seasons 1 through 8 or whatever, and the movie for free, completely for free, right? Now, there's a certain caveat here, is that the caveat is that when I watched the first and second season, only maybe like half the episodes would actually play due to the free X-Files being in a not perfect condition, right? I suppose if you want to be a completionist and watch all the X-Files, you get what you pay for, right? But one of the things about this is that there's a certain kind of degree of synchro mysticism, or also perhaps even garbology, that in the same way, can you imagine that like in primitive times our ancestors may have slaughtered a few chickens and cut them open and looked at their entrails to divine something, but now in our modern day you can find a whole box set of X-Files DVDs, and in the way that you would be like throwing I Ching coins or like Euro stocks or whatever, you can put your X-Files DVDs in your DVD player and divine a kind of a secret message based on which episodes play and which episodes do not, right? So that so that what seems to be accidental scratches due to personal negligence could actually be a secret code in which there is the aliens have set this up so that, you with a kind of a binary system that you can like divine, take your X-Files set, tell us, we can all study this, like which episodes play and which episodes don't, and what story forms based on with the gaps of the episodes that are missing. And when you only get these ones that play, what are you paying attention to, right? I'm kind of joking and I'm kind of not, basically. I'm only half joking. But that's one of the things on my mind about this, is sort of like I've been watching an uneven, somewhat random assortment of X-Files episodes due to whoever the previous owner not keeping them in very good condition, right? But despite that, I also have to admit that there was an X-Files reboot that came out maybe 10 years ago that I was stoked for. And then the process of trying to watch that, it wasn't that the shows themselves were bad, but it was extremely difficult to, like, for some reason, it was just like you try to record it on your TiVo or whatever it is, or like you try to I don't understand how cable TV works anymore. It just trying to watch a new series coming out on cable, I don't know, it was just too much for me. But one of the things that I picked up trying to watch the reboot was this. I don't know. I have never watched the X-Files in its entirety, and due to the fact that half the episodes may not play, who knows how much I'm going to watch. But one of the ideas that has been introduced to all this is like this question about alien abductions right? Or aliens, and the idea of being a believer or being a skeptic. And the thing about this is that for me, there's a personal dimension to all this, in that I have a mental health disability. I have the kind of disability that I have is in the realm of bipolar and schizophrenia and believing. Oh, look, the funny thing about this is that I don't really agree with my diagnosis very much, but it nonetheless helps me to survive because I've got a pension giving me all this money. But I think it's kind of questionable because I actually think that well, this is interesting. When you actually study famous people who had these kind of disability, you look at people like there's this guy who they did the Beautiful Mind movie over, who was really into game theory. And you have a guy who's a very high level rational thinker, and his specialty was all about these highly advanced logic systems. So the thing about this is that if you're actually intelligent, and I'm not, but I don't want to blow my own horn here too, but you may, if you actually are just dealing intelligently with the world as it really is, that could actually just be crazy because the world itself is fucking crazy, right? And this is what a lot of people said. I don't have to roll out all the quotations about it's insanity is trying to adjust yourself to an insane or sick society, or whatever. Or it's mad to be normal, all this kind of stuff. There's something about the actual truth of what's going on. And in this, the thing is, it's also difficult because there are a lot of people with psychosis and schizophrenia. And that cliche about the tinfoil hat, you have to send messages to the mothership and stuff like that. The point about one of the things that makes X-Files interesting to me is that if I'm honest about my own experience, about my own weird ideas or weird experiences or weird phenomenon, at no point in time is there anything that comes up in my own personal experience that has anything relating to aliens or anything of that nature at all. It's just a kind of cliche out there. But there was a time when I was in 2012 or something like that, I would have. There's 2 TV shows that I would go to as comfort shows. One was Star Trek TNG. The other was the X-Files. And I had this thing where sometimes I would have insomnia. I wouldn't be able to sleep. And as a coping mechanism, I would, rather than trying to fight it or what are you going to do? You're going to drink valerian root or something, or you're going to I don't like sleeping aids. Or whatever you're trying to do to knock yourself out. I'm fuck it, I can't sleep. I'm just gonna stay up all night, watch the X-Files, and there's something about doing that which gave it's where you feel nervous and anxious, but I don't have paranoid beliefs. There's no I'm not really even that into conspiracy theories. It gives me something to play out. I'm feeling uncomfortable, and instead of it's worse to me, it feels worse to be the world, there's legitimate shit going on in the world which is uncomfortable, and we're just gonna not talk about it, and we're gonna watch Cinderella, Disney, Snow White and the Seven. There's some kind of aesthetic of this, or this whole thing. Maybe it's also in my mind because I don't know. There's something about there's a certain kind of aesthetic of trying to just focus on nice things, not there's all World War III could be breaking out or something like that, or there could be all sorts of terrible things in the world, but we'll just get upset if we think about those things, so we're just going to focus on really positive, happy things while repressing the underlying discomfort. And then what tends to happen, I think, is that the thing that's being repressed ends up, the return of the repressed, as in psychoanalysis, comes back as an illness or a malady or a bad dream or something like this. There's all sorts of ways that the thing that to me, it's actually sort of therapeutic to be able to watch X-Files and have an avenue to have this play out as a fantasy without being repressed and all this kind of stuff. But the point is that my personal thing about this is that I sort of resent the fact that my identity as a person with this kind of disability basically says that I believe in funny things that don't. But the thing is, there's a bit of a truth, because I have this tendency to want to do something like astrology or want to explore into some kind of strange territory, or I don't know. I have to admit that ever since this year happened with all this what's his name, that guy, that stuff going on, it's made me sort of curious about conspiracy theories, and this all just resonates for me with this Pluto and Aquarius squaring Venus. And one of the things that I'd like to introduce here, what I've been trying to get to, is this idea that what if you watch X-Files not from the perspective of I want to believe, right? That I want to believe that, like, with all the crappy shit going on, like, what if there are actually aliens? Wouldn't that be cool? I think everybody kind of, like, even if the aliens are kind of morally ambiguous or something like that, or hopefully they're not just absolutely, space tyrants coming to take over our planet or whatever. There's some exciting thing that if the supernatural is real, it sort of redeems things, right? But the problem is that what if instead of jumping towards this, let's believe that aliens are real, let's believe that all the paranormal is real, what if you take it from a perspective of total skepticism, right? And what if you like think about the whole Fox Mulder, his sister is abducted, he goes to the FBI, and he is fed all this information about aliens and UFOs from these shady the government characters like Deep Throat or whoever their names are or whatever, right? But the basic point is that you have what has been exposed with the Jeffrey Epstein stuff is that there is obviously an elite ring of sex trafficking. What if there are no? It's also, if you watch the first season of X-Files, there is a episode that is they're talking to an anthropologist, and the anthropologist makes this comment that, like, what if you had a group of, like, what if you just had human beings that became sufficiently advanced that they felt that they were aliens in relation to the general population, and in the same sense that Elon Musk has said that I am an alien because I feel I'm this rich guy who can build, you're concerned about buying a house, I'm concerned about buying outer space for my own personal project, and this makes me feel like an alien, and I'm so rich that I could just abduct anybody, and anybody who stands in my way, you could hire a hitman and kill them, and you have an elite, you have a class of elite oligarchs that are above the law. And what if Elon Musk says, look, I've been doing all this stuff in outer space, I haven't seen any aliens yet. What if you just take that at face value as being true, and the stuff that Elon Musk has been, obviously in the emails, Elon Musk is all mixed up in this. What if you have a class of elite oligarch pedophiles, there are no aliens, and the whole point of the X-Files is that you've got the Mirageman thing going on, where you have a whole disinformation industry where maybe on the other hand, the American government has some advanced technologies that they haven't disclosed to the public, and so there is a certain level of secrecy to not let their enemies know what they might have, so they can play the poker game with a poker face and not let people know what's actually going. Like, maybe there's a certain degree of legitimate stuff going. It's not all just fake, but just for the sake of a thought experience, what if this thing about extraterrestrial life and aliens and all this kind of, what if it's all fake? What if it's all fake and it's all just set up to be like, people don't want to accept the fact that the highest levels of our society don't respect the rule. Like, the rule of law. Know your rights. You have the right not to be raped. You have the right not to be abducted. You have the right to, you know what I'm saying? You have the right not to be treated as a slave. If you're an American, the whole point of the freedom and democracy of America is that you thought you were enslaved by the British government. And now if we see that even the royals like Prince Andrew Andrew, are mixed up with this, maybe the whole point is that the Americans had the right idea that there is huge systematic abuses of power built into the very hierarchies of our society, and they had every right to rebel and split off from the British Empire, right? And now the funny thing about this is, so what if in all of this there are no aliens, there's no outer space bullshit going on at all? What if this is all just a group of aristocratic elites who have used this idea of aliens to give some people a product, a consumable product, because it's exciting. You can be like, oh wow, I wouldn't want to get anal probed and or something like this, but the fact that maybe there are aliens out there is exciting, and I'll buy a bag of popcorn and buy the ticket, and it'll keep me entertained, and while I'm entertained, I don't have to do anything to change I don't have to address the problems in society because they make me uncomfortable. But at least I have a product that helps me be entertained by the situation, right? And that helps me cope and get by in life, right? And what if you just take it all from an extremely skeptical perspective, right? And this is basically where I'm at now. Like, I'm kind of like, and based on the way that it's been going with the UFO disclosure project and the way that the American government has been handling it, I think it's more. I'm gonna just basically make the prediction that there are no UFOs, there are no aliens, and the whole thing is basically like a MK Ultra psyop to fuck with people, and so that rather you have some sort of like, you can sell people some like, glow in the dark, take me to your dealer t-shirts, or like, blacklight posters, and make a fucking capitalist industry out of it rather than actually dealing with the problems, right? And it's also kind of funny because it's like, if you watch X-Files from this perspective, what you also start to notice is that there's this reoccurring thing around disability, about people, like, imagine if you're somebody who's like, if there is this level of crime and corruption out there, and it makes you really angry, but you're not able to do anything about it because what are you going to do? You're going to go taxi driver on them? This is basically it, right? So the thing is, like, I think this is also what I'm kind of thinking about with the Mars Saturn kind of thing going on, is that, like, you got to be careful. It helps to have some sort of, I think this is basically the thing, it helps to have some avenue to express yourself, or an avenue. There's something about this with Venus and Pluto. You have to understand there's a certain kind of, like, the palette that you're painting with. The colors are like, there's something inherently uncomfortable with it. But X-Files is therapeutic because it gives a container for the energies to sort of play out and express themselves, and you could contemplate it without being all like, oh my god, I have to go fucking like taxi driver on, and I'm just, what if you're just like, this is all the crazy people that are worked up by conspiracy theories. The problem isn't, I don't think, the conspiracy theory culture itself. The problem is, like, there's a number of reactions that you're going to have to this stuff, and one of those reactions is going fucking Travis Bickle on, probably, you don't, like, what if you're just confused? What if you, how do you know that you figured it out correctly? How can you be so certain about what's true and what's not true, right? The thing, and I also, like, before I end this and just leave it there, the point about this too is that when you think about Aquarius, I've done another video about this, I'm just repeating myself, but with Aquarius, there's a number of ancient myths associated with Aquarius, and the problem about most astrology is that they're trying, like, there's this whole thing about, like, the reality of what myths are like, right? There's all sorts of, like, I mean, you have all sorts of weird shit going on in myths, and that's kind of what make the myths the myths. But there's this whole thing where Aquarius gets turned into this thing that's all about the cupbearer. Like, you are a servant to the king, and you bear his cup, and, like, if the king is being poisoned, you drink the poison so the king doesn't have to drink it, and you die rather than the king. This is, you can sense that this person is probably castrated too, so he can't have a line of his own. So there's this really strict control with Aquarius, right? And there's this thing also about the that fits with the theme of abduction, because it's like there's also people associate the myth of Ganymede with Aquarius, and the myth of Ganymede is literally like what's it, Zeus and Ganymede? Like, it's like you have an attraction for some sort of like male boy toy that you're just going to abduct from his, like these aristocratic elites are just going to swoop down and abduct the ones that they think are like cute or whatever as your little like this is the, it's been happening ever since ancient Greece, guys. Don't worry about it. It's just an archetype. Like, and like this is, but how does it, most astrologers, like there's something about, it could be like a leftover from like the 1970s kind of era of modern astrology where everybody was really optimistic about the age of Aquarius. But the thing about this is that like, or they talk about, I don't understand about how they would talk about Aquarius as being hyper individualistic. Like, oh, the Aquarius people, they're just so, like, because they, like, it's kind of like they take this thing about the like Aquarius theme about aliens, and they're like, oh, so like people who are like aliens are like these quirky outsiders, and we're like, oh, we're just so like individuals, we're just so different, like we just need to express ourselves, right? And it's like, I don't think that's really it at all, right? If you actually look at the myth, because the myth is like you are like an ordinary person, like everybody else, and some god has their fancy on you, and then so some god abducts you and then takes you out of your home circumstance, and now you have some sort of experience where if you came back down to earth and tried to communicate with your home people, they wouldn't be able to relate to it, right? And so it could be this thing, you're not just like, oh, I'm just such a unique individual, guys. It's like, no, you were fucked up because you were predated on by some like predatory elite, and now you're like, oh, you're just a quirky outsider, right? And it's like, wait a minute, you're kind of, oh, this is your identity now, and we'll create a whole bunch of products to sell to you, and you'll become like a fashion diva and all this kind of stuff. But what if it's all just because you got fucked up, right? And it's like, I think with Pluto and Aquarius, it highlights the fuck, rather than like when we had Neptune in Aquarius, there may have been more of like the rose-colored glasses around this. I think Neptune reminds me of like the road is having like the pleasant illusion. Whereas with Pluto, I think it's more, Pluto's going to be here a long time, but there's something about like being honest about what's fucked up rather than just being all like, trying to make this into a product or to like an aesthetic, right? To be all like, oh, spooky academia, guys. I'll just wear like, these rimmed glasses and like, I'm just like a spooky investigator, guys. And this is like, you can dress up for Halloween and like make a big industry of selling this stuff. And it's like, well, wait, isn't this supposed to be about like, there's actually a fucking social problem that that we don't know how to deal with and that nobody wants to talk about, and we're just going to make sell popcorn and just like get entertained about it because this is like, it's kind of fucked up, don't you think? And yet I have been exposed to this culture ever since I was a young child, since before I was too young to even be like literate or question any of the things that I was seeing. And it was like, I was exposed to this from the point of being like a young child on the playground. And it's like, did you see the episode with the goddamn poo monster from the septic tank that kills people? Right? So there's this whole, like, there's this archetype that you can approach at the level of a child in kindergarten, or you can approach at the level of being a mature adult. But I don't know, at least there's something fun at least about like trying to take this thing, which could be a bad vibe, and I can at least find a way to like enjoy it. But is it a perverse kind of enjoyment, right? I also listened to the whole Pennyroyal podcast, and there's this whole realm of stuff that is just like, it's interesting, but it's also kind of disturbing. But I think the problem is I tend to be a little bit, it's not that there's a certain, I don't know if I want to identify completely as a skeptic, because obviously I'm doing an astrology, like I believe astrology works. Another thing would happen. Well, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. You'll like I aware of the transits, and then you see the transits play out, and it's, yeah, astrology works. I'm not a skeptic about astrology. There's this sort of whole thing about the outer space quality and all this kind of stuff, and I'm not like, I think maybe with aliens I'm more agnostic, but I was thinking I'm pretty damn sure that the whole, you know, you're going to get abducted and anal probed and all this kind of stuff, or have these, like, you know, hypnotic, you know, regress. I think it's all bullshit, basically. That's I'm going to hazard a guess. And one of, like, my basic approach is to be like, I'm not going to just like produce, like, there's all these people that might, like, I'm not going to, I don't know, what am I going to say? I'm not really even that interested in the UFO thing. But I just have, like, I have to, there's an opportunity to call it as I see it, basically. And when this specific phenomena, I'm going to be a skeptic towards. But the thing is, plenty of people see flying saucers and stuff too. What if there are real flying saucers? But what if there's, like, how do you parse? I don't know. I don't have the answer, right? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm even wrong. Who knows? I'm just putting it out there. Anyways, thanks for watching. Tune in next time. Do.